Welcome to Senior Talk with Ms. Bonnie, where every week we explore the joys and challenges of aging. Join Ms. Bonnie as she talks with experts, seniors, and caregivers about topics that matter to the senior community. From health and wellness, to relationships and family, to finances and social engagement, we'll cover it all. This episode, Ms. Bonnie sits down with Mellanie Guess, an expert who conducts workshops that helps families deal with end-of-life issues. They discuss the benefits of pre-planning for your funeral, some of the considerations, and Ms. Mellanie answers questions Ms. Bonnie has. So whether you're a senior yourself or just want to understand and support the older adults in your life, you're in the right place. I'm producer Chuck, and without further ado, Senior Talk with Ms. Bonnie.
Hi everyone, my name is Bonnie Agee. Welcome to Senior Talk with Miss Bonnie. Let's begin. Today I chose to talk about prepaying your funeral. Well, maybe not necessarily you, but I want to talk about why I chose to prepay my funeral. My son is my only child. And I thought that it would be hard on him to have had his mom for all those years, and then he has to bury her, to be the sole person responsible for burying her. So I thought this would be a great idea. And the fact that he has 5 children and 1 grandchild is a lot. Although we touched on this briefly in our other podcast, I just wanted to share with you why I did it, to relieve him of that unnecessary to me pressure. Because you're born, you live, you're gonna die. It is inevitable. It is going to happen to each and every one of us. So why not be prepared? Okay, let's just say, for instance, I did have a insurance policy, life insurance policy, and that for X amount of dollars that was going to bury me. But I decided, I had a little windfall, and I decided that it would be best to give him that value of that insurance policy. I pay for my funeral. I get to see what he does with the money. I can't govern it because once I put it in his hands, it's his. But I get to see what he did with it. And the fact that he doesn't have to worry about burying me. He don't have to worry about, you think she would want a viewing. What was her favorite flower? We know her favorite color is green, but still, that's a lot for an only child. If he had siblings, to share this with, that would be a little bit different, and less burdensome. Is that a word?
That is a word.
Oh, right. You go, Bonnie. And this way he can just deal with his grief, and it relieves his wife of, rearranging finances in order to do this, because it was the unexpected, although it was expected, you see. So it relieves everybody of unnecessary pressure. Now, that's why I chose to do that. And during the funeral home that I chose, the way I chose the funeral home is I called 3. Okay, one of them never did call me back. The other one put me on hold, never did come back. And the third one was the one that I went with, and I got to talk to somebody. And I made an appointment. I had no choice. I had no choice to say this one's better than that one, and I heard this one was good. None of that. It was just who responded to my phone call. Well, I decided to take my sister with me, and I asked my son to come along, and he did really, really good. But it's a lot to ask of your child to come with you to, pay for your funeral and pick your urn. I don't think he went to the urn picking part of it. I don't think he did that, but I know he sat there and he listened and everything. And when it was over with, I gave him the paperwork. I don't need it. Hell, I'll be dead. Then you have to search through my stuff to find out where it is. No, you take this home with you, put it in a safe place, because hopefully the way the law of averages is, you'll need the paperwork before I will, I know I'll need the paper. No, you'll need the paperwork to show before you. Got me?
Yeah, I don't think at any point you're going to be responsible for the paperwork.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just that, and the reason I took my sister with me is because she thought it was really, she never said morbid, but she kind of thought it was kind of, Bonnie, we know you've always marched to a different drummer, but this is really, but I wanted her to see the practical because she's a very practical thinking person, and I wanted her to see my reasoning and how practical it was. We were in there for a total, I'm going to say 30 to 45 minutes, and everything was done. Everything was to my liking. Now, I do have to go back because I do want to be in the newspaper instead of just a little clip saying Bonnie died on this date. I did want a little bit to add a little bit so that I could at least name my grandchildren, and my great grands. Why some people think of this as morbid, I don't know. I don't know. It is not morbid. It is saving people you love from unnecessary hardship and grief.
I never thought it was morbid. My grandmother did the same thing. My father's mother did the same thing. She had pre-planned her plot, bought all that stuff, how she wanted to do it. And then when she returned to glory, that's how it went down. But she had taken control over the whole situation. And I didn't find it morbid at all. I actually found it empowering. And it's this movie out where I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was a scene in there where the guy who passed away owed the guy who, like, he had some kind of falling out or some beef, or maybe owed a couple dollars to the guy who actually owned the funeral home. So when he buried him in ballet shoes, and his toes was pointed, and it was just one last little middle finger to the man, and it was hilarious on screen, but it got me thinking, like, man, like, if you could control that, you can't control when you go, you can't control how you go, but you could control how it look.
Exactly. I think we all know that death is the inevitable. So why not prepare yourself for that day that is going to come? And isn't it, it's okay to leave people insurance policies, et cetera, et cetera. It's okay to do all that. But isn't it nice just to have that stuff done, out of the way? And guess what? You cash that policy in and you got a little bit extra left to go on a little vacation, do something nice for yourself. For you, Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, cancel your policies. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying what I did and why I found it to be beneficial on my behalf. Now, what I would like to do is introduce you to Mellanie Guess, who also works for Dedicated. She is a membership growth consultant, and she also works in a funeral home administrative grief workshop. So she can answer any questions that I may have, and I have several. But we're going to talk to Mellanie about all of this. Mellanie Guess will be joining us. And thank you so very much. I'd like to introduce you to Mellanie Guess. Welcome.
Hi, Ms. Agee. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak on your show and talk about funerals, funeral planning. Such a great opportunity to share with the community.
We're going to get started with the questions, but I would like to, before we do get started with the questions, how long have you been in this business?
I started working at a funeral home back in 2014, so almost 10 years now. And I worked in the funeral home on different levels, different aspects. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of things. Not all, but a lot.
Okay. Well, I can begin. The first question is, how should someone go about choosing a funeral home and director for their final services, and what questions should they ask to ensure they are making the right decision?
So most people choose a funeral home based on their experience or their family's history. A lot of people say, well, this is where my family always goes, or sometimes a person may visit attend a funeral and see the services and say, I like how they did this, I like how they did that, or how they were treated. And those are how most of the time people treat, and sometimes cost as well.
Yeah.
I don't hear much about cost, but I'm sure that plays a big part into it.
Yeah, I remember. I remember when I lived down in Birmingham. If you chose a certain funeral home, then they would say, "Oh, they ain't had no money," you know. But we were little. We didn't know no better.
Yes, ma'am.
But we know they didn't have no money. Okay. The next question is, what are some common misconceptions and that people have about funeral homes and funeral planning process?
So some of the misconceptions that I think people have about a funeral home is that it's a bad place or a dreary or a sad place. And yes, it is. It does have a place where you are experiencing sadness, but it's also a time of celebrating that person's life. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people want to use their life insurance policy opposed to doing the funeral planning. I would say that because a life insurance policy is not going to plan your funeral. It's only going to pay for your funeral, God willing you have enough, but it does not plan your funeral. So that would be one of the most misconceptions. And then the other thing of misconception with funeral planning is that the cost, that it may be unaffordable to me. But I tell people sometimes you might have to break things into pieces. Even though a lot of funerals offer packages, you may at this time in your life only be able to afford them to pick up your body, clean your body off, and embalm it. So then that's all you pay for at that time. Another thing, it may be, I just want to pay for my casket. Do that. Anything helps that family, to alleviates the burden off their family. When you plan a funeral, when somebody dies, you have up to 100 questions that need to be answered within 24 to 48 hours. So you're making a lot of emotional decisions, which is then going to cost you money.
I do have a question. The difference, I was under the impression that when you paid for your funeral, you also paid for your burial. I didn't know there was a difference between funeral and burial, because you're thinking you're going to go to a funeral, you're going to get buried.
Right.
But you don't think of burial as being a separate entity from the funeral, which is just the function leading up to the burial.
Yes. So a lot of people will go in, they'll pay for the funeral, and whoever's doing the planning, they will ask, do you want to put in there for burial? Now, you could put money in the pre-plan for the burial. However, you need to go to that cemetery of your choice and select a plot and pay and secure that plot. Now, the difference between putting the money in the pre-plan and doing the burial is that you're not locking in a price with the cemetery. You only have money that can go towards it, but you're not locking in the price. So you want to make sure that happens. Some people do their funeral planning through the cemetery. It's just their choice of how they want to do it.
How do you work with families to help them make difficult decisions during the planning process? And what support do you provide to help them cope with their loss?
During the planning process, you ask questions. Sometimes you may ask, like, what's their favorite colors? What do you see your funeral being planned as? What things you like, what things you don't like. I've seen people plan their funerals down to the detail of who they want to sing at their funeral, what songs they want to sing. I've seen people plan down their funeral that they leave money in the pre-planning for the repast. When I did my training in Nashville, Tennessee, there was a lady, she left money for her family to go do the repast at the casino. That's what she wanted. So she had enough money in there, and she left $5 for everybody to do a slot on her. Yeah, so it could be whatever you want it to be. We plan for everything in our life. This is something that we should plan for as well.
Okay. How have you seen the funeral industry evolve and change over the years? And what do you see the future of funeral services? You like that question.
So how has the funeral evolved? When I was growing up, funeral, you had one slip of paper, front and back. That was the program. Now you got 17 pages. You got a video going on. Some people have a band. It's pictures and ornaments all around. You got people standing up now, not in a casket. So funerals have definitely changed. We have definitely gotten creative when it comes to burying our loved ones. What I see in the future, more of that. More of that. We put so much emphasis on the show. I hope people put just as much emphasis on the life that they lived as well. And people do deserve a good funeral service, a good celebration. Yes, should be celebrated. One thing, I want to go back to the question that you asked about. We were talking about graves and things like that. The cremation part. A lot of people don't think about, when they're being cremated, what to do with the remains after. If you leave your cremains to your children, do your grandchildren want the cremains? And what to do with them? I tell people we've had these bodies for however long we've been living, and that we need to be responsible for them, even in our death. And there should be a plan for it. We know we pass it on to our children, grandchildren, whatever. But after that, then what happens? And those are the things that we should think about, particularly when it comes to cremation.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense, because my sister is with her oldest daughter, began with her husband in Michigan, then with the baby daughter, and then with the oldest one. And she's just sitting there collecting dust. I mean, she's way up top, and she's at her mother-in-law's house, and she wouldn't want to be there.
Yes.
We don't think about it going further, that she's still with somebody.
Yes.
Still somebody.
Yes, and in the state of Ohio, you can't legally scatter ashes, although people do. But there are different urns that you can purchase to have them buried. You can still have cremains buried. That you can have them put in the ocean, the lake, and there's different biodegradable urns that those can be put in.
Okay, now suppose the urn falls and all the ashes spill on the floor, so you'd be like sucked up in the vacuum cleaner.
Probably,
that's a bitter.
Possibly.
Or the cat, huh?
Yeah, or the cat licking up the ashes. Yeah. Most of the time, the urns are made of either a real nice wood or a steel, where if something like that happens, it shouldn't happen. But then some people don't buy an urn, and when you get the cremains, they're just in this black box in a bag. So you do want to be responsible, have some place for the cremains to go at the end of your life, and think about beyond that. Are they going to be sitting around for the next 100 years, or am I going to put them in a place of rest, bury them under a tree? There's so many things that you could do with your cremains.
I see. Now, finally, what advice would you offer to listeners who are thinking about planning for their own final services, or who are supporting someone who has recently experienced loss?
When you're planning, you want to think about what is it that I see my funeral services as? I'm a giver, so I want to leave something for everybody that comes. So you want to think about, what do I want to wear? Is my body going to be shown, or am I just going to do direct cremation where there's no body and just a memorial service? If you're thinking about being buried, then is the casket going to be open? Is the casket going to be closed?
You have to pay for that too, don't you?
You pay, no, not for the opening and closing of the casket. You pay for the opening and closing of a grave.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So those are the things that you want to think about. What color flowers? And write those things down. Even if you don't pre-plan, pay for a pre-plan, you could still write those things down. You could go to a funeral home, and they will help you write up everything. And your family will feel so relieved when you come in and you say, oh, everything's already taken care of. Whether it be financially or everything's written down. This is what she wanted. She's already picked out this, and that. It's such a relief off the family. It lessens arguments and emotional spending.
I know my mom, when my mom passed, well, my dad died first, then my mom died, but she had a plot for her, She was in the middle. I mean, my dad, she was in the middle, and her last husband was on the other side of her. Provided his kids, but his kids wouldn't let him. They took him back to Alabama. They wouldn't let him be buried there.
Oh.
But she had paid for, all 3 spots, because she was like,
And that's what pre-planning does. Pre-planning helps you save money. You save about 40% now than you would at the time of a person's death. When you go in a funeral cemetery and you see different people's names and you see that blank spot, that's somebody who's pre-planned. There's people that have bought out whole plots for their family, so that's an expense that they pay for now. Think about if I bought a house 80 years ago, my house 80 years ago in comparison to how much I buy it now. That's how pre-planning is.
Yes.
Things go up, costs go up, and you want to be sure that you take advantage of what you can now, opposed to paying for it later.
And I saw the advantage also of prepaying for my funeral, that the cost, she assured me that the cost would not change. It would not go up no matter what. She also gave me a peace of mind when she told me that should something happen to the funeral home, by law, this goes to another funeral home. What do I do? Who do I contact? Do I call downtown? We didn't get that far. It was a bit much trying to pay for your funeral.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So when a person pre-plans, the federal government now has it where they don't pay the funeral home directly. They pay an insurance company. And so in the event that a funeral home goes out of business, you still have your policy because it's secured with a large insurance company. And so you can move that policy into any other funeral home.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is a question, and I don't want to put it racial. Let's put it economics.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yes, ma'am.
Why aren't people who know they're going to pass taking care of this? Like my son and I was talking about that on our way over here. He says there's several variables, finances and the reality of it,
all of the above.
Yes.
So I would say mostly lack of knowledge. Some people don't know that you can do it. And the other will be economical. People think, I have an insurance policy, or either I can't afford that right now. And then the other part is, mentally, am I ready? I know the older I get, the more I understand my immortality. So you don't see a lot of young people rushing to do that. But it should be done. If you go into like a wealthy part of the neighborhood, a lot of them have their children's funerals planned out or pay for, or starting to pay for them by the age of 5. They have the cemetery paid for, definitely, and then the funeral and stuff, because we never know. Life happens. Look at COVID. COVID shocked us all.
Yes.
We had
a lot of people.
We did not know that was coming. And just think how many people were unprepared for that. Not only emotionally and mentally, but financially. And so if we had did this early on, it would have prevented a lot of stress. Not only the stress that we went through dealing with coming out of our houses, martial law, but the stress of having to plan this funeral. Because, during that time, you were only allowed like 5 or 10 people at a funeral service. Right. And so I have to decide, not only plan the funeral, but decide who's come to this funeral. Exactly.
Yes. Okay. I think that's about it. We've covered everything. I appreciate you answering these questions for me.
Appreciate you having me.
And Mellanie Guess, I'd like to speak with you again.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
having me.
Yes. This concludes our segment for today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Have yourself a wonderful day.
That brings us to the end of another episode of Senior Talk with Ms. Bonnie. We'd like to thank Mellanie Guess for providing wonderful insights about preparing for the end-of-life expenses. The information provided by Ms. Bonnie and Ms. Mellanie is from their own knowledge and experience, and we encourage you to consult with the professionals at the funeral home of your choice regarding their own policies, capabilities, and to answer any questions you may have. If you want to stay connected with our community of senior citizens, be sure to follow us on social media. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast for future episodes. Remember, it's never too late to learn and grow. So let's continue to embrace our experiences and opportunities together. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next episode. The music you hear is produced by Jay Rawls for Polar Entertainment and appears on his album Jazz Hop. You'll find the link in the description.